The Pontifex Maximus was the high priest of the College of Pontiffs in ancient Rome. This was the most important position in the ancient Roman religion, open only to patricians until 254 BC, when a plebeian first occupied this post. A distinctly religious office under the early Roman Republic, it gradually became politicized until, beginning with Augustus, it was subsumed into the imperial office. Its last use with reference to the emperors is in inscriptions of Gratian, who, however, then decided to omit the words Pontifex Maximus from his title. The word Pontifex later became a term used for Christian bishops, including the Bishop of Rome, and the title of Pontifex Maximus was applied within the Roman Catholic Church to the Pope as its chief bishop. It is not included in the Pope's official titles, but appears on buildings, monuments and coins of popes of Renaissance and modern times. Etymology. According to the usual interpretation, the term Pontifex literally means bridge builder, Maximus literally means greatest. This was perhaps originally meant in a literal sense. The position of bridge builder was indeed an important one in Rome, where the major bridges were over the Tiber, the sacred river. Only prestigious authorities with sacral functions could be allowed to disturb it with mechanical additions. However, it was always understood in its symbolic sense as well. The pontiffs were the ones who smoothed the bridge between gods and men. The interpretation of the word pontifex's bridge builder was that of Dionysius of Halicarnassus and Marcus Terentius Varro, while Plutarch derived the word from Old Latin patis, meaning a powerful or absolute master, while others took it to come from patis facia in the sense of able to sacrifice. The last derivation is mentioned also by Varro, who rejected it, but it was the view of Pontifex Maximus Quintus Scaevola. Others have held that the word was originally Pompifex. The word pont originally meant way, and pontifex would thus mean maker of roads and bridges. Another opinion is that the word is a corruption of a similar sounding but etymologically unrelated Etruscan word for priest. Yet another hypothesis considers the word as a loan from the Sabine language, in which it would mean a member of a college of five, from Osco-Umbrian pont, 5. This explanation takes into account the fact that the college was established by Sabine king Numa Pompilius and the institution is Italic. The expressions Pontus and Pomperius found in the Agivina tablets made denote a group or division of 5 or by 5. The pontifex would thence be a member of a sacrificial college known as Pomperia. The Roman title, Pontifex Maximus, was rendered in Greek inscriptions and literature of the time as Rho Chi Iota Epsilon Rho Epsilon Upsilon Sigma, or by a more literal translation an order of words as Rho Chi Iota Epsilon Rho Epsilon Sigma Mu Epsilon Gamma Iota Sigma Tau Omicron Sigma, was the most important priesthood of ancient Rome. The foundation of this sacred college and the office of Pontifex Maximus is attributed to the second king of Rome, Numa Pompilius. Much of what is known about the regal period in Roman history is semi-legendary or mythical. The Collegium presumably acted as advisors to the Rex in religious matters. The Collegium was headed by the Pontifex Maximus, and all the pontiffs held their office for life. But the pontifical records of early Rome were most likely destroyed when the city was sacked by the Gauls in 387 BC, and the earliest accounts of archaic Rome come from the literature of the Republic, most of it from the 1st century BC and later. According to the Augustan-era historian Livy, Numa Pompilius, a Sabine, devised Rome's system of religious rites, including the manner and timing of sacrifices, the supervision of religious funds, authority over all public and private religious institutions, instruction of the populace in the celestial and funerary rites including appeasing the dead, and expiation of prodigies. Numa is said to have founded Roman religion after dedicating an altar on the Aventine Hill to Jupiter Elysius and consulting the gods by means of augury. Numa wrote down and sealed these religious instructions, and gave them to the first Pontifex Maximus, Numa Marcius. Roman Republic. In the Roman Republic, the Pontifex Maximus was the highest office in the state religion of ancient Rome and directed the College of Pontiffs. According to Livy, after the overthrow of the monarchy, the Romans created the priesthood of the Rex Sacrorum, or King of Sacred Rites, to carry out certain religious duties and rituals previously performed by the king. The Rex Sacrorum was explicitly deprived of military and political power, but the pontiffs were permitted to hold both magistracies and military commands. The official residence of the Pontifex Maximus was the Domus Publica, which stood between the House of the Vestal Virgins and the Via Sacra, close to the Regia, in the Roman Forum. His religious duties were carried out from the Regia, unless the Pontifex Maximus was also a magistrate at the same time. He was not allowed to wear the toga praetexta, i.e., toga with the purple border. In artistic representations, he can be recognized by his holding a iron knife or the patera, and the distinctive robes or toga with part of the mantle covering the head, in keeping with Roman practice. The Pontifex was not simply a priest. He had both political and religious authority. It is not clear which of the two came first or had the most importance. In practice, particularly during the late Republic, the office of Pontifex Maximus was generally held by a member of a politically prominent family. It was a coveted position mainly for the great prestige it conferred on the holder. Julius Caesar became Pontifex in 73 BC and Pontifex Maximus in 63 BC. The major Republican source on the pontiffs would have been the theological writings of Varro, which survive only in fragments preserved by later authors such as Aulus Gellius and Nonius Marcellus. Other sources are Cicero, Livy, Dionysius of Halicarnassus, Valerius Maximus, Plutarch's Life of Numa Pompilius, Festus, summaries of Aureus Flaccus, and in later writers, including several of the Church Fathers. Some of these sources present an extensive list of everyday prohibitions for the Pontifex Maximus. It seems difficult to reconcile these lists with evidence that many Pontifex Maximi were prominent members of society who lived normal, non-restricted lives. Election and number. The number of pontiffs elected by cooptatio for life was originally 5, including the Pontifex Maximus. The pontiffs, moreover, could only come from the old nobility, the patricians. However, in 300 BC to 99 BC the Lex Ogulnea opened the office of Pontifex Maximus to public election and permitted the plebs to be co-opted as priests, so that part of the exclusivity of the title was lost. But it was only in 254 BC that Tiberius Coruncanius became the first plebeian Pontifex Maximus. The Lex Ogulnea also increased the number of pontiffs to 9. In 104 BC the Lex Domitii prescribed that the election of all pontiffs would henceforward be voted by the Comitia Attributor. By the same law, only 17 of the 35 tribes of the city could vote. The law's promulgator, Domitius Ahenobarbus, was shortly afterwards elected Pontifex Maximus after the death of the incumbent Metellus Dalmaticus, something of a personal revenge because, the previous year, he had expected to be co-opted as a pontiff to replace his late father, but the Pontifical College had appointed another candidate in his place, the office's next holder. This law was abolished in 81 BC by Sulla in his dictatorship, in the Lex Cornelia de Sacerdotiaza, which restored to the great priestly colleges their full right of cooptatia. Also under Sulla, the number of pontiffs was increased to 15, the Pontifex Maximus included, and Sulla nominated Quintus Caius Aelius Metellus Pius as the next holder of the office, the only truly unelected Pontifex Maximus in history, since even the other pontiffs did not get a vote in the matter. In 63 BC, the law of Sulla was abolished by the tribune Titus Labienus, and a modified form of the Lex Domitia was reinstated providing for election by Comitia Attributor once again. Gaius Julius Caesar followed Ahenobarbus's precedent by being elected by public vote, although Caesar at least had previously been a pontiff. Marcus Antonius later restored the right of co-optatia to the college, in time for the election of Marcus Aemilius Lepidus. Also under Julius Caesar, the number of pontifices were increased to 16. The Pontifex Maximus included, possibly because Caesar's own long absences from Rome necessitated the appointment of a deputy pontiff for those occasions when 15 needed to be present. The number of pontifices varied during the empire but is believed to have been regular at 15. Extraordinary appointment of dictators. The office came into its own with the abolition of the monarchy, when most sacred powers previously vested in the king were transferred either to the Pontifex Maximus or to the Rex Sacrorum. Though traditionally a dictator was formally mandated by the Senate for one day to perform a specific rite. According to Livy in his History of Rome, an ancient instruction written in archaic letters commands, "Let him who is the praetor Maximus fasten a nail on the Ides of September." This notice was fastened up on the right side of the Temple of Jupiter, Optimus Maximus, next to the Chapel of Minerva. This nail is said to have marked the number of the year. It was in accordance with this direction that the consul Horatius dedicated the Temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus in the year following the expulsion of the kings from the consuls. The ceremony of fastening the nails passed to the dictators, because they possessed greater authority. As the custom had been subsequently dropped, it was felt to be of sufficient importance to require the appointment of a dictator. L. Manlius was accordingly nominated, but his appointment was due to political rather than religious reasons. He was eager to command in the war with the Hernici. He caused a very angry feeling among the men liable to serve by the inconsiderate way in which he conducted the enrollment. At last, in consequence of the unanimous resistance offered by the tribunes of the plebs, he gave way, either voluntarily or through compulsion, and laid down his dictatorship. Since then, this rite has been performed by the Rex Sacrorum. Duties. The main duty of the pontifice was to maintain the Pax Deorum, or peace of the gods. The immense authority of the Sacred College of Pontiffs was centered on the Pontifex Maximus, the other pontifice forming his concilium or advising body. His functions were partly sacrificial or ritualistic, but these were the least important. His real power lay in the administration of Judivinum or divine law. The information collected by the pontifice related to the Roman religious tradition was bound in a corpus which summarized dogma and other concepts. The chief departments of Judivinum may be described as follows: the regulation of all expiatory ceremonials needed as a result of pestilence, lightning, etc. The consecration of all temples and other sacred places and objects dedicated to the gods. The regulation of the calendar, both astronomically and in detailed application to the public life of the state. The administration of the law relating to burials and burying places, and the worship of the manes or dead ancestors. The superintendence of all marriages by conferratio, i.e., originally of all legal patrician marriages. The administration of the law of adoption and of testamentary succession. The regulation of the public morals, and fining and punishing offending parties. The pontifice had many relevant and prestigious functions, such as being in charge of caring for the state archives, the keeping the official minutes of elected magistrates and list of magistrates, and they kept the records of their own decisions and of the chief events of each year, the so-called public diaries, the Annal Maximi. The Pontifex Maximus was also subject to several taboos. Among them was the prohibition to leave Italy. Plutarch described Publius Cornelius Scipio Nasica Serapio as the first to leave Italy, after being forced by the Senate to do so, and thus break the sacred taboo. Publius Licinius Crassus Dives Mucianus was the first to leave Italy voluntarily. Afterwards it became common and no longer against the law for the Pontifex Maximus to leave Italy. Among the most notable of those who did was Julius Caesar. The pontifices were in charge of the Roman calendar and determined when intercalary months needed to be added to synchronize the calendar to the seasons. Since the pontiffs were often politicians, and because a Roman magistrate's term of office corresponded with a calendar year, this power was prone to abuse. A pontifex could lengthen a year in which he or one of his political allies was in office, or refuse to lengthen one in which his opponents were in power. This caused the calendar to become out of step with the seasons. For example, Caesar's crossing of the Rubicon in January 49 BC actually took place in mid-autumn. Under his authority as Pontifex Maximus, Gaius Julius Caesar introduced the calendar reform that created the Julian calendar, with a fault of less than a day per century, and which remained the standard till the Gregorian reform in the 16th century. It also, coincidentally, made 46 BC, the year of Julius's third consulship, 445 days long. Roman Empire. After Julius Caesar's assassination in 44 BC, his ally Marcus Aemilius Lepidus was selected as Pontifex Maximus. Though Lepidus eventually fell out of political favor and was sent into exile as Augustus consolidated power, he retained the priestly office until his death in 13 BC, at which point Augustus was selected to succeed him and given the right to appoint other pontiffs. Thus, from the time of Augustus, the election of pontifex ended and membership into the Sacred College was deemed a sign of imperial favor. With this attribution, the new office of emperor was given a religious dignity and the responsibility for the entire Roman state cult. Most authors contend that the power of naming the pontifex was not really used as an instrumentum regni, an enforcing power. From this point on, Pontifex Maximus was one of the many titles of the emperor, slowly losing its specific and historical powers and becoming simply a referent for the sacral aspect of imperial duties and powers. During the imperial period, a pro-magister performed the duties of the Pontifex Maximus in lieu of the emperors whenever they were absent. In post-Severan times, the small number of pagan senators interested in becoming pontiffs led to a change in the pattern of office holding. In republican and imperial times, no more than one family member of a gens was member of the College of Pontiffs, nor did one person hold more than one priesthood in this collegium. However, these rules were obviously loosened in the later part of the 3rd century AD. In periods of joint rule, at first only one of the emperors bore this title, as it occurred for the first time during the reign of Marcus Aurelius and Lucius Verus, when only Marcus Aurelius was Pontifex Maximus. But later two Pontifex Maximi could serve together, as Pupienus and Balbinus did in 238, a situation unthinkable in republican times. In the crisis of the 3rd century, usurpers did not hesitate to claim for themselves the role not only of emperor but of Pontifex Maximus as well. Even the early Christian emperors continued to use it. It was only relinquished by Gratian, possibly in AD 376 at the time of his visit to Rome, or more probably in 383 when a delegation of pagan senators implored him to restore the altar of victory in the Senate house. Tradition of sovereign as high priest. The practice of religious and secular authority united in the sovereign has a long history. In ancient Athens, the Archon Basileus was the principal religious dignitary of the state, according to legend, and as indicated in his title of Basileus, he was supposed to inherit the religious functions of the king of Athens in earlier times. Eastern traditions, from the ancient Egyptian to the Japanese, carried the concept even further, according their sovereign's demigod status. With the adoption of Christianity, the Roman emperors took it on themselves to issue decrees on matters regarding the Christian Church. Unlike the Pontifex Maximus, they did not themselves function as priests, but they acted practically as head of the official religion, a tradition that continued with the Byzantine emperors. In line with the theory of Moscow as the Third Rome, the Russian Tsars exercised supreme authority over the Russian Orthodox Church. With the English Reformation, the sovereign of England became supreme governor of the Church of England and insisted on being recognised as such. Much the same occurred in other countries affected by the Protestant Reformation. Even in countries where there was no formal break with the Holy See, various sovereigns assumed similar authority. An example is Joseph II, Holy Roman Emperor, whose ecclesiastical policy is described in the Catholic Encyclopedia article on him.